I'd like to again welcome you to Jazz Latino right here on listener-supported KCLU. And I'm Raul Rico Jr. And guess what? In the studio, I have with me, from New York, the legendary Eddie Palmieri. Eddie, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much, Raul. Thank you. It's my honor, my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Let's go ahead and start with a brief summary about yourself. The background, when you were born, and all that scenario.
Well, let's start with my mother. My mother arrived in 1925 in New York. She was a 16, 17-year-old. And came with an uncle of ours and an aunt. There was another uncle and aunt living here already. And then my father arrived a year later by boat, naturally, in those years. And they married, in New York. And then my brother was born in 27, the great Charlie Palmieri. And I was born 9 years later in 1936. And then after that, naturally, there was no other brother or sister, so my brother was my complete inspiration and my first teacher. And by 5 years old, I was singing, and my brother would accompany me on the piano and I used to sing all the different songs, but particularly like songs that wartime songs of Daniel Santos, for example. And my mother would dress me up in an army suit, because she was una costurera, that was her profession. And until I got sick in the voice, it was like, what happened? She said, well, it's all over, because I used to compete in these amateur hours, and I used to win and all that. My brother playing piano, we had a scam going there. So, but sure enough, then after that, by 8 years old, I'm on the piano. And by 11 years old, I'm studying with, my first teacher was Miss Bocanegra in Kelly Street in the Bronx. But my second teacher, after... at 11 years old, became Miss Margaret Barnes. And Miss Margaret Barnes is in the Negro history books. She was the concert pianist and my brother's teacher, and taught in the Carnegie Hall building that she had studios in there. All of the classical teachers have studios that they teach to have, for their pupils. And then in the Wild Theater right next door is where I gave a concert, in a competition at about 11, and I stood with her for a few years. And the thing was that by 13 years old, I wanted to play timbales so badly, man. And I finally convinced her to get me a pair of timbales with my grandfather, and she bought me a case that weighed more than 2 pairs of timbales, And the next thing I knew, I was playing with my uncle, El Chino y su alma tropical.
Oh, okay.
And it was the Chino Gates, which that family is here in California since 1950, because my uncle Raymond Gates and Andy Gates, they came out in the early 50s. And then they settled in La Puente, where I dedicated El Dia Bonito to.
No kidding.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And San Francisco. So then, sure, after that, I played 2 years with my uncle, which was un tresista Miro, from El Conjunto Taonet de Puerto Rico, Manolín, segunda guitarra. My uncle Chino, who sang and was the leader. My other uncle, Frankie Gates, played conga. And then we had Tati, el trompetista, Roberto, el bongocero, and when there was enough money, we bring Nicolás, the bass player. Otherwise, Nicolás was out. And we used to do la villa, the Spanish villas up in the Catskills in New York. And by 15 years old, my mother, remember those 2 years and me trying to pick up that heavy metal box, and to carry the timbal, and she would tell me, pero Edward, tú no ves qué lindo se ve tu hermano yendo para trabajar y él no está cargando un instrumento. ¿Cuándo tú vas a aprender, Eduardo? And I'm trying to pick up this box, man. And I say, estoy aprendiendo, mami. And sure enough, by 15, I sold the timbales to my uncle and got back on the piano. and never got off, and never will, and I'm studying more than ever now.
Out of curiosity, what's the type of tamales were they? Were they Humberto
Oh,
Morales?
no, Lidis Humberto. That's
Really?
Right.
Oh, man.
That's right. I didn't even know what I had.
Must have been hard to get rid of them, huh?
Because the first one I had, the first tamales was made to me by a drummer called El Pato. El Pato was a very short drummer that played with my brother in the show band in 1948 in the Copacabana when you had to work there 6 nights a week. You had the show band 6 nights a week, and you had the rumba band, the Latin band, 6 nights a week, and they would play the show on the show band's night off and things like that. It was very heavy in that time in New York, or the nightclubs. So then my brother, the drummer, he made up this pair by hand, and I said you had to tune them up with your hands. They had the nuts. But it was my first set.
Wow.
And then after that is when they got me my Lidis of Humberto. That's right, exactly, from Henry Adler. Never forget.
Oh man, with Charlie, he basically, I feel he's one of the pioneers of the Latin music scene in New York. How was that whole experience with your brother? Your mentor, your idol?
Everything that you look for. There's nothing else to say. It was like everything. I imitated him in his form of an attack, how he attacked the piano. Everything. And then by time I'm 15. You figure like by 15 he's playing with Tito Puente. When Gilbert Lopez was drafted, he had to went to the Korean War. Also Frankie Colon, the conga player. That's when my brother comes into the conjunto, and that's when Mongo Santa Maria comes into the band.
Wow.
From Mexico after a certain time with Predez Prado and an accident I believe that he had.
Right.
And then he comes to New York and he starts with Tito Puente. When he gets there, I don't know what to do anymore because I've never heard anything like that. And the orchestra of Tito Puente, who he rose and he rises immediately to the occasion, changed the band around after Vicentico Valdez had left and took Manny Oquendo with him from the conjunto. Then sure enough, different players come in. But then eventually when my brother leaves, because Manny Oquendo was still there when Mongo is playing, Mongo leaves Manny leaves with Vicentico Valdez, but Tito then changes the whole band in the form of like doing numbers like Coco Mai Mai, and it becomes incredible that he captures the moment of a different style band as my brother just stays with him for a while. He leaves, and that's when eventually Willie Bobo comes in to play bongo with Tito Puente, and he stays until approximately 57, I think, when they leave with Cal Jader. They come back here, and then it's historical what happens here in the West Coast.
It's incredible because I am so kind of not regret that I was born so late, but I wished I could have lived or at least experienced that era, the early 1950s when Machito and Tito Rodriguez and Puente were going at it.
I caught it naturally in 1955. I start with Johnny Segui. I had played with other groups before. My brother would recommend me.
Sure.
And because my reading, my music, my sight reading was completely, unprepared because I was playing timbales and I thought I'd never play piano again. Now I try to come back, to play piano, and I'm having problems trying to read the music of the bands, and I used to bring the books home and to really make how to do that. And then in the name of my brother, my brother was the daddy, and, hey man, Eddie, you got to do your thing, So sure enough, when eventually I passed with a group called from Ray Almo with Bobby Santiago, Robertito Santiago, with a very talented trumpet player and vibist that recorded eventually with Jose Cubelo and Mon Rivera in a number called Mi Familia, where he's the only one that he plays and he shows his wares there. But he dies very, very young, and unfortunately, and I land eventually in 55. My brother gives me an opportunity, recommends me to Johnny Segui. Johnny Segui was the bass player, and let's say it was like triple A, a double A, triple A, which and the reason it was triple A is because he had a great book. The reason he had a great book was he's a great artist and he was a copyist. So if he, at that time, the recordings were so every day. Machito was recording, Tito Puente was recording, Tito Rodriguez, and the singles would come out like one every week. There was something coming out,
brand new, huh?
And you would buy the 78. At that time, there was 78s,
right.
and I would be right there, man, buying that 78 because I was a fan of the three orchestras before I got to know about the music that was coming out of Cuba, which comes later. It comes later because in 1955 I stayed very short with a period with Johnny Segui because the owners actually fired me because I hit the piano too hard, and the other piano player was called Pancho Jompetecla. And he's the one that used to bust it, but I got blamed. And then, and it's great because Peñi Rodriguez, the vocalist that became very famous, and then sang with the Gran Combo within that band. And Yayo Lindio was with Johnny Segui.
Wow. And
the reason that he had the good book is what I wanted to get to is because then he would copy let's say he would copy an arrangement for Tito Rodriguez. So then he would tell him, Mina, Tito, I'll copy it for you. And you don't have to pay me, man, but could I make another copy for myself? You see? And then little by little, they said, seguro, after I recorded, so he would do that with all the groups. So he had a wonderful book.
Oh, yeah.
And it was wonderful for me to start because the next band that my brother gives me an opportunity to join is Vicentico Valdez.
Wow.
And Vicentico, that was with Manny Oquendo, with Tommy Lopez, and with Mike Collazo. And that's where I'm made aware, because of Manny Oquendo, the orchestras that were coming out of Cuba. And then I dedicated my life really to the structures of the dance structures of
Cuban music,
of the Cuban dance music from 45 to 1960. After that, the doctrine changes and everything changes after that.
Right.
But we're the ones that upheld the structures. So it started Afro-Cuban, it becomes Afro-Caribbean, and now it's Afro-World.
Yeah, exactly. We are currently speaking with tonight's featured artist, Mr. Eddie Palmieri, who is here visiting us at the studios. And Eddie, it's a pleasure having you here. It's an honor, my friend.
Thank you. Mine, brother.
Getting back to what did you and your brother listen to? Just out of curiosity. I mean, I know you delved into what were you listening to?
Well, remember that when I'm 11 years old, my brother's already married and is not home anymore. So because of the 9-year separation, I'm going to be 12. He gets married at 20 years old, and so what was happening constantly over there was my brother was involved in all the great bands like Glenn Miller and the big bands, and Claude Thornhill, whatever was the bands that were coming out. Plus, in the Hispanic, genre, the Latin genre at that time, we had Miguelito Valdés, you had Julio Andino's band. You had René Hernandez had already arrived with Machito, and he did some recordings on his own, with certain orchestras, conjuntos he did, and then he did the arrangement for everyone. He was the genius. To me, he was the genius and my personal chosen godfather.
I think defined New York Latin music from that era. He was
he was the heart of the Machito Orchestra. Mario Basar was the musical director. Machito was the leader, but the heart of that band, and when it changes the characteristics of the orchestra in its tremendous density and presentation of the structural compositions that he brought into that band, then he becomes the heart of that orchestra. So René Hernandez did some recordings. You had Pupi Campo had a fine orchestra that had Tito Puente on timbales. That
Joe Loco.
Joe Loco was Joe Loco now at that time is working with the bands, but Joe Loco becomes very, very, very popular and hot when he records with a small group, and he records tenderly. And in some of the small groups, even Tito Rodriguez sings with him with the small group that he records, and he becomes like it sells an incredible amount of records going into the 50s. But still going 40, 47, 48 of what I'm hearing was my brother had at the house. And then you had Noro Morales, and you had Humberto Morales, and you had Ezzy Morales. So all those orchestras, my brother would have at home, and I would listen, I would hear them, So when he gets married and he leaves, by that time I'm already ready to start with my Tito Puente, who was like, my mentor because of timbales. Tito Rodriguez, which was my favorite conjunto, and Machito, which was naturally everyone's favorite orchestra,
The granddad.
Yeah, and then I go for 51, 52 until I come into the Palladium with Vicentico Valdez. So I start in 1956. I still see what 52nd Street was still about, man, with all the jazz clubs.
Oh, man.
I just didn't know who the jazz players were, and I didn't know. I didn't comprehend it. I didn't like it. And my thing was, forget about liking it. Getting into any other music. I had enough problems trying to make and read the music of Vicentico Valdez, man. What did I care if I was Thelonious Monk? Or who is that? What kind of a name is that?
Art
that
Blakey.
kind of thing. And then you had like a Earl Gardner, and then you had Billy Taylor, from down the line, everything down the street, from Broadway down to 6th Avenue. That was incredible. It
must have been an incredible scene, like you're describing.
And on Broadway, then you had the Birdland.
Okay. Let's talk. Let's kind of move on. What's the reason why you're here? In essence, I mean, what's going on this weekend?
Oh, we came all the way just to see you and be on your program, Raul. I thought you knew that.
No, come on, Eddie. Let's talk about what's happening this weekend.
I came by rail, man.
And you encountered some wolves on the way too.
Never. The reason is we're gonna perform Saturday at the Hollywood Bowl. We were superimposed onto the presentation because originally we were not on it, and we were on our way to the Caribbean. And unfortunately, what happened in the Caribbean, we had some place we were going to go to Santo Domingo. We had something that we were going to do that was going to be into the heading of Latin jazz. But in the interim, at the same time, we had recorded for Mr. Ralph Mercado, RMM. We recorded a CD that it's my first CD in 11 years that it's a major project as far as vocalists were concerned. This is my, as far as our agreement, this is the last CD for the company. But we did, I thank Mr. Mercado and everyone in there, because it's really, I was so impressed with what I saw out here, and that Nelson is out here, and they really got it together. And but we had done 2 CDs following Palmas with the same brass, which Eddie calls, my son Eddie, who's the co-producer of my last 3 CDs with me and my personal manager. He calls it the trilogy. That was Palmas, Arete, and Vortex. The only change in the rhythm section was that Anthony Carrillo was the bongocero in Palmas. Then in the next 2, Paoli Mejia is the bongocero, and Richie Flores stays on conga. Now for this one, it was going to be the 2 sides of Eddie Palmieri, and it was, which was recommended by Ralph Mercado, and he recommends a singer called Wichi Camacho. Wichi Camacho in Puerto Rico is the most sought after coro singer, because from Gilberto Santa Rosa, everybody, Tony Vega, they must use Wichi.
Really?
Wow. One of the him and Jerry Medina are the best of coros singer that you could possibly ever get, in my opinion. Also, never had his position as being the front singer, and that's certainly not with an orchestra like what I prepared for him. So I'm so elated for him and for Germán Oliveras, who has made his mark as a tremendo sonero. We're just elated that he also was showcased wonderfully here, and they both rose to the occasion. In the CD, that the name of the CD called El Rumbero del Piano was given to me by Daniel Ponce.
Oh, wow.
Many years ago. He says, "Tú eres el rumbero del piano." And I never forgotten it. So the 2 sides of Eddie Palmieri, which I had recorded 13 compositions, and there was 4 already that was done in Latin jazz, Only one was kept. That was called Bug.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Bug is jazz now.
Right.
It's not jazz Latin or
Straight
not
jazz.
Latin jazz. The reason what I call jazz Latin is when you have either a drummer and a conga and not the full rhythm section.
Right.
And Latin jazz when you have the full rhythm section of timbal, conga, and bongo. And this is jazz on this one. And we used four horns. We have Mr. Brian Lynch playing the lead, Mr. Tony Lujan playing second trumpet and the soloist on Bug, Mr. Conrad Erwick, and Mr. Phil View. Mr. Phil View is a young phenom that came to us directly from Mr. Horace Silver's orchestra.
Wow. Excuse me, Eddie. This is KCLU Thousand Oaks Ventura at 88.3 and KCLU Santa Barbara at 102.3, a community service of California Lutheran University. You are in tune to Jazz Latino, and my name is Raul Rico Jr., along with Mr. Eddie Palmieri, who is here visiting, and we're having a great old time so far. In fact, Eddie, why don't we listen to something from your brand new CD? In fact, I wanted to ask you about Malagueña Salerosa. I remember one version that Tito Puente did with Rolando Lacieri.
Right.
What's a classic.
Right.
And why did you want to do this tune? I just out of curiosity.
Oh, well, I saw the movie accidentally, and that happened to me when I did also El Día Que Me Quieras in the White Album.
Right.
That Cheo Feliciano sings the classic with Rene Hernandez with the complete orchestra of three violoncellos, and which is something, and four Victor Paz playing the four horns. Let me
just interject something. That is one of the most incredible albums.
Yeah.
I swear, if I was to have a handful of albums, to take, if there's a fire or something, that would be one of them.
The reason you hear me, that's because you're absolutely right. I just don't even count that one. That one you just put to the side.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, that's,
All right, so what happened, I had seen that movie in Puerto Rico in 1972 or 73 when there was floodings in Puerto Rico, and my wife and my kids were in Puerto Rico, and they were going to school there at that time. And I went to see my mother and father and my wife, and we were watching TV, and here came out El Día Que Me Quieras,
right,
with Carlos Gardel. And then I kept the theme on, and then I knew exactly what I wanted, and the fugue. And at the same time, we were putting together Sentido, which is ironic that you were playing it today, because I was approached by Harvey Avern, and he was a recording artist that had recorded for Fania under the name of Arvito. He made his own recording company with a gentleman called Sam Goff, who used to handle Repris records, that the one with B.J. Thomas, raindrops dropping on your head from the Butch Cassidy,
right.
And that was his mother-in-law's company also. And Sam Goff and Harvey Avern put together Mango Records, which is eventually turns to Coco, because there was another island record I believe had the name, so they had to change it. But on Mango is when we do Sentido, which is Ismael Quintana's last CD with me, or last album, until we meet in 1981, that does the second side of the White Album. Okay, so on this here, I'm watching television again with my wife in New York this time, and here comes to the Spanish station the movie with Pedro Armendáriz and Maria Felix.
Oh, man.
And it's in black and white. And sure enough, he's the general, and he comes into town, and he locks everybody up, including her father, her father he didn't know. And then the next thing, she goes into a whole thing with him, and he just falls head over heels to her after she smacks him twice or something like that. And he's trying to win her over, and he sends the trio, I believe that era los trio Escalante, I'm not sure, que vienen y cantan La Malagueña Salerosa. I had heard the one of Tito Puente and Rolando Laceria, yes. But when I heard this again in the 3/4, an original 3/4, I couldn't get it out of my mind again. And now I went looking for the music and finding out who the writers were, Galíndez and González. And I wrote it home. I did that arrangement on this recording. And pas d'histoire, which pas d'histoire means in French, don't come in that avenue where you're coming from, because I know where you're coming from and it's not going to work, more or less, And I did that pas d'histoire. And, in Spanish or in Cuban is Engáñame bien chaleco que te conocí sin manga. You know what I mean? So don't be trying to pull anything here. So we use that title. Then La Malagueña, and then Para que escuchen which is the message that is so important on this CD. It's a lyrical, harmonic, and rhythmical message. The motto is stop, sit down, and listen in goodwill, because it's the essence of an exciting dance orchestra that there are none anymore. It's extinction of what's happened, unfortunately, to the genre, known as salsa.
Right.
What we have is non-exciting orchestras after they altered the structures, the sacred structures. The rhythm section is always in a secondary, tertiary position, which is completely absurd. And the arrangements, unfortunately for the arrangers, they're dictated to by the record companies, and it gets more and more simple that you don't know which orchestra sounds which. There has there's no orchestra that has its own signature, because there is none, and then each one sounds worse than the other, and that just had to stop. And that's why I just came back after. What I wanted to tell you is, I did those 3 arrangements 9 years ago. They've been in the calendar for 8 years.
Really? What?
When they offered me an insane budget, that I just looked at them and was hysterical, and I knew that there was going to be no recording. Went home, put them in a closet, and the next thing I was approached to by was the project with India, and then her business manager made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and that's why we recorded that. And the original recording that I was going to do, which is the beginning and the extension of this one, which is now called a Rumbero de Piano, is a very, very important CD again, with its message, closing the 20th century and opening up the 21st century, in my opinion. So en la malagueña salerosa now, as far as being the relation between man and woman, is the most beautiful lyrics ever written, in my opinion. Between the bonds between the man and woman.
So let's listen to the beautiful composition Malagueña Salerosa, arranged here by tonight's featured artist and in-studio guest, Mr. Eddie Palmieri, right here on Jazz Latino KCLU.